Thank you guys all for joining us. And as you guys get settled, I just want to welcome everybody. My name, as I said, is Catherine Miller. I'm the Vice President of Membership here for the Les Dames Escoffier DC chapter, which encompasses Metro DC, parts of Maryland, parts of Virginia. In my day job, I work with philanthropists and foundations and nonprofits and activists and others to find actionable solutions to big problems, including those in our food system. And so I'm very excited to be here today to introduce this conversation on the state of the restaurant industry and the state of the restaurant and food hospitality industry at this time. I really want to welcome you on behalf of everyone at the Les Dames chapter here in DC. And just a few words for those of you who don't know us. I see some unfamiliar names, but I also see a lot of members. To our members, thank you. Thank you for supporting this programming. To those of you who are new to Les Dames DC, we are one of 29 chapters around the world, really, Canada, the United States, and the UK, made up of women and women identifying professionals and leaders in the culinary space. So that encompasses food, hospitality, beverage, and all the related industries. It's everyone, it's leaders from every sector, from restaurant owners to chefs, to bar owners, to publicists, to media, and emerging entrepreneurs and students as well. So if you're already a member, again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for support of our programs, which also include, for those of you who are not members or maybe a refresher, also include grants, scholarship, mentorship, and educational programs, all focused on strengthening and professionalizing the food and beverage and hospitality industry, and really focused on women and women identifying leaders. We'll put it in the chat if you are new to us or you don't follow us currently on Instagram. We'll put our Instagram handles and the website into the chat so you can find out more information along the way. Now, on to the thing that you guys have been so patiently waiting for. And again, thank you for letting us get through our little technical glitch. And again, if you have not renamed yourself, please do so, because there aren't this many Lori Gardners in the world, though that she is pretty fabulous. I want to just take a minute and thank our panelists, Michy Mendelsohn, Jeanine Prime, Kathy Hollinger from the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington, and in particular, our moderator, who will give a much more fulsome and correct introduction to everybody, Charissa Benjamin from Savor PR here in DC. If you have questions, just as an FYI, if you have questions throughout, just put them in the chat and we'll get to them hopefully throughout this. But Charissa has was going to lead us in an amazing conversation with these women leaders from all different sectors of the industry, talking about the state of the industry. She herself is a tremendous leader. Her PR firm, Savor, sorry, I keep saying that wrong, is been considered one of the best and PR agencies in the country, according to Forbes magazine. She has a number of amazing clients here in the DC area and further afield, including, stalwarts and classics such as Ruth Gresser's Pizzeria Paradiso, and newcomers to the scene, Jane, which is getting so much attention. And so we really thank her. She's also a brand new member of Les Dames, and so thank her for jumping into moderating this panel today. And with that, Charissa, I'll turn it over to you, but thank you all for coming, and we'll be back. Please put any questions that you have in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Catherine, not Kathy. Very, very happy to be here today, and honored to lead this panel and really help us get started on a really engaging conversation and discussion on how the industry is really been affected by COVID and where we are right now and what the future holds. So to introduce our panel, we have, and I don't believe that she needs any introduction, but Kathy Hollinger, President and CEO of the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington. I think we all know who Kathy is, but I think everyone in this industry can say wholeheartedly that she has fearlessly led us through this pandemic. We have been very fortunate and lucky to have her at the helm of the Restaurant Association. And I know that many in this room, virtual room, have been very grateful for her guidance and her fearless leadership as we have really gone through a really, really rough 18 months. Michy Mendelsohn is the CEO of Sunnyside Restaurant Group, where she oversees operations for 6 restaurant brands, including Good Stuff Eatery and We the Pizza, which I think has particularly been known for banding together with other restaurants and leading an honorable effort to feed hundreds of troops near the Capitol in the days following the January 6th insurrection. She has led many of the marketing and social media efforts for all of her restaurants, and has been a steadfast leader in the industry through the pandemic. We also have with us Jeanine Prime. She is the co-owner and operator of Kane, which is the award-winning Trinidadian restaurant on 8th Street Northeast. And I will say, full disclosure, that Jeanine is a client, but I will also say that as a Caribbean national, I can attest to the food being legitimately good and authentic. Jeanine is also co-opening St. James within the coming weeks. It's a modern Caribbean restaurant, which is coming soon along the 14th Street corridor. So without further ado, let's get started. Kathy, we are gonna throw the opening question your way. So this pandemic, it has been dynamic. It has thrown curveballs every which way. And frankly, the last 18 months have been just really a blur for many of us in the industry. And so as we head into the second winter, can you break it down for us? Where is the industry right now in terms of recovery?
Yes, thanks, Charissa, for having me, and great to see so many beautiful faces. I would say that, you know, it's interesting where we are today. I mean, every day has felt like a year, so it's really been 18 years. Well, you can do the math; it's more than that. But right now, people are mostly feeling hopeful. They are very fragile. I think everyone in the industry is fragile, whether you are as a business owner, whether you feel that emotionally, whether you feel that physically with all that you've had to expend, particularly if you run a restaurant. But mostly the future is rooted in hope. I would say that there's probably 30% of operators, as we've talked and surveyed and met with, who are really worried about the winter. I think that it is half rooted in all of the uncertainty that has unfolded over the last 18 months. And it is, of course, the uncertainty rooted in COVID-19 and how that has played out. But I am trying to keep people in a place where they feel really grateful. They feel hopeful. Unfortunately, there's a lot that has to be processed and absorbed as we go into the winter. The only silver lining is that we have had to go through the worst of it a year ago, 18 months ago. And I do feel that our resilience as an industry, as small business owners, has positioned us to figure out how we can quickly adjust to what is needed today. I see more people out. I see a lot of people indoor, outdoor, everywhere. I see a lot of events coming back online, whether it's smaller events, weddings, or bigger events citywides that bring economic impact to our city and region. I think that that is also giving people a lot of hope that the plans that were once on hold are either being planned or are future planned for the spring.
Yeah, I'd say hope is definitely the one thing we have to hold on to. So Micheline, tell us, your restaurant group, which you run alongside your 68-year-old mother, has really weathered this storm. What has recovery looked like for your restaurants, especially with such a competitive landscape and so many different operators and restaurants that are coming back out onto the scene and trying to capture as much business as they can from a frail dining public, if you will?
Right. First of all, thank you everybody for joining us, and thanks for having me. For us, we've kind of a couple weeks ago gotten this catchphrase, slow and steady wins the race. It's still a struggle for us. We're fast casual. And I think that people that are wanting to go out want to make it an event and be sit down and, you know, have cocktails and have a server and enjoy the whole atmosphere of actually being out and in a restaurant. And I think because we're fast casual, we're a little bit kind of at the end of that. You know, it's more of a grab and go situation for us. So we've had a pickup, but it has been slow. And I think particularly because we're on Capitol Hill. So we've still are struggling with the loss of tourism and nobody coming really back to work. So I think those are two factors. Among our brands, we have a hamburger spot and a pizza place, and the pizza place is doing well. And it did, okay during the pandemic. It was at 50% when everybody else dropped significantly. And I think that's because, people made pizza something that they would order at home. And so that restaurant seems to be bouncing back a little bit quicker than the others. But it's definitely, it looks busy, but it's not as busy as it was. So I think there's, a misnomer there where a lot of people are walking out and they're like, oh, this is packed on a Thursday night. But okay, but we used to be packed, 4 to 6 nights a week, not just 1 or 2. And so I think there's like a little bit of a difference there that the general public maybe still doesn't see, but we feel as restaurant owners. And in terms of, during the pandemic, we did one promotion after another to try and get people in. And then we just stopped because it was like spastic in the office. We were like, let's do this. Then, okay, no, wait, let's run and do that. And let's, it was getting so crazy and wild. And we just, honed in and thought, okay, let's focus on the food, on the restaurant, on packaging, obviously for deliveries. And then let's just, start doing promotions when we really kind of come back. So we're looking more at the new year for those kinds of things.
So less is more until we get to 2022.
For us, at least.
Yeah.
I don't know. For us, we're in that situation. I mean, we do a couple fun things because we're still a neighborhood restaurant group. So we're having like a Halloween party, for neighbors and kids on Capitol Hill. So we do things like that. But in terms of constant promotions and discounts, and we used to do so much of that every 2 or 3 weeks, we'd have something going. We've just kind of stopped. And to be honest, it's also given our staff a little bit of a break. They're all on burnout as we are on burnout. And so to just kind of take a breath and just run a restaurant without all the fanfare around it has been nice.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. It can get exhausting for sure. Yeah. So Jeanine, you co-own Kane, as we mentioned in your intro, and you reopened for dine-in earlier in the summer. But you also doubled down and decided to open up a new restaurant with your brother, Peter. Tell us about St. James and what motivated you to open a restaurant after all the ups and downs of the past 18 months.
Well, thank you, Charissa. And I just want to echo the thanks that others have expressed for being included in this panel. I feel like I'm the newbie. I'm the new one on the scene, new to the restaurant industry, and to be alongside Kathy and Micheline, who are veterans and much more experienced than I am. But thank you for having me. I don't know, Charissa. I think when you are in the restaurant industry, you probably have a high risk tolerance to begin with. But I think we are, as Kathy said, holding on to hope. I do think that the restaurant industry is coming back. It's going to change. We're already seeing changes happening in the kinds of business models. We're seeing a lot more restaurants adding service charges and things like that, and really rethinking the employment model and the value proposition for workers. But I think there is still that steady demand, for the kind of service that we're offering at Kane and will offer at St. James. The pandemic really, I think in some ways, sort of heightened or deepened the relationship that folks have with food and what it means to them. Because of the pandemic, Travel has been curtailed for many folks. And so eating out is an important way to experience different cultures, connect with different cultures and different cultural experiences. I think, Mish, you alluded to this point, but there's also sort of this heightened need to connect with friends, those relationships that we didn't get to foster, those people that we didn't get to see during the pandemic, during lockdown. People are really anxious to connect over food. And, you know, eating out is an event. It's something that's celebrated, that, you know, we perhaps took for granted before. So we're definitely seeing that really increase demand for dine-in and full service restaurant experiences. So it's with that hope that we are moving forward with plans to grow Cane and to open up the new restaurant, St. James.
So Kathy, I want to switch and talk about relief and what that looks like for the industry. So Congress, as we all know, very busy these days trying to find some kind of agreement on infrastructure and the Build Back Better bills. Hopefully that'll come soon. But as they refocus efforts on replenishing the RFF, what are your thoughts? Is it dead? Are you hopeful that funding can be replenished? And what do you think restaurants and people in this industry, what can we be doing effectively to put pressure on Congress to replenish the RFF? Because I think it's obvious to many in this room that it is vital that funding come for many to survive through the coming months.
Yeah, so, you know, with RRF, I'll say this, Congress is very, very busy, but in a lot of ways, they're very busy doing nothing, right? There's just so much need and there's so much disunity, and that leads to, unfortunately, unproductivity. So while we are regional and our efforts are always focused on how are we finding support relief regionally in the state of Virginia, state of Maryland, in counties, and then of course in DC, you know, we have been using our market as a real opportunity to be a platform and a voice, knowing that members of Congress and their staffers are in and out of our restaurants every single day, whether they are picking up to go for work, whether they are ordering for their family, dining in, dining out. I mean, really, the asset that we have here in the metropolitan region, just through the windows that we have, the seats that we have in our restaurant, and those who are working in our restaurant to deliver a service, no matter what that mode of service is. We have to use our voice to weigh in on the imminent need for relief. I think the biggest issue, as many of us know with RRF, is that a lot of people were left behind in a very big way and offensive way. And they've got to get a lot right. This is not about adding more money to RRF. This is a matter of funding it properly so that everybody who applied for that relief is getting the relief. And we have tons, scores in our market who were left unfunded. So yes, that needs to happen. The pressure needs to continue. You know, I will say that we have platforms and tools and services at REMW where we can literally give that to you. You just plug and play, push it out, because it is imperative. I'm hopeful that every single person recognizes, as a member of Congress, the need for this. I do believe they do. I believe they just can't get it together to figure out the mechanism to refund it properly. So that's that part of it. In terms of other relief, you know, the good news is that the city on a local level really was a role model to everywhere else around the country in terms of how they thought about relief. Is that because we're a bit more agile legislatively, regulatory? Yes, you know, that's the only benefit maybe of not being a state, is that we have that ability to kind of make things happen quickly and push dollars out. But the dollars that we push out are nominal in the big picture in terms of what has been lost in 18 months. There is really no recouping dollars that were lost 18 months ago, 17, 16, 15, even today. And RRF was somewhat the cure-all of those who needed significant funding. They were going to get it through that mode there. So we have to get that, but we also have to recognize the opportunities we have around alcohol to go being permanent in the district and counties in Maryland, and also about to be permanent in the state of Virginia. These are huge because these were lines of revenue that were not once there. And while we relied so heavily during the pandemic, now we should operationalize them as operators to identify a whole new source of revenue coming into your restaurant. Also, how we're looking at outdoor dining, indoor dining, as we're looking at curbside to go, menus that may translate better as we think about supply chain and product shortage and all of the many things that all of you as restaurant owners have to think about. It's a lot, but I also view it as an opportunity to think about how we reset our operating models to think about how we can bring in revenue that was once more of a Band-Aid to stop the hemorrhaging, or now maybe it can be used as we go forward to think about really successful models in 22, 23, 24, and beyond.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on as I switch to Micheline to talk about trends. So as a fast casual, during COVID, we've certainly seen a growth of fast casual restaurants. But I think for the industry as a whole, quick and smart pivots, adopting technology at a faster pace has definitely been something this industry has experienced. And I would say that the restaurant industry is not top of that list for adopting technology at a quick pace, but the pandemic certainly forced that upon us. What are some of the biggest trends that you see coming out of the pandemic that will have staying power and that will help to shape the industry as we move forward and out of this?
Sure. So a couple of the easy ones right off the bat, I think the QR code is here to stay. That, you sit at a table and you scan it with your phone and you can order online and don't necessarily have to deal with a wait staff person right off the bat. I think that has a lot of staying power. I also think for us, at least, we've pivoted a lot to making our things delivery friendly and have had to, as a result, get on all the platforms that we make no money on. And I don't know how we're going to stop that. It's hard to go backwards from that. So we're on Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub and all these platforms where the margins are so incredibly low for owners. But we had to get on them because of the pandemic. And now people are so used to going on those to order that I think it's going to be hard to get off them, even though some places do their own delivery services. So I think that's, a trend that's, I think, here to stay. I would like it not to be, but I think that's just the way it goes. And I think also, there's this great article or this great post, actually, I saw a couple of weeks ago. This woman posted about how the, supply chain is hurting restaurants and the produce is going up and meat is going up, but our prices have been staying the same, right? Like we sell a hamburger for $5.95, let's say. And if all my prices go up in order to make that hamburger and my payroll cost goes up, I'm still selling that hamburger at the same price because nobody's coming in to buy a $12 hamburger, which is probably what it should be priced at. And so I think it's really interesting as owners trying to figure out how to rework your restaurant. Like you said, usually we open and we have this plan of how it's going to be in the service and the atmosphere and capturing, our guests and creating an experience for them. But we're almost trending towards this self-service model which I don't think anybody really wants to do, but it's almost like you have to in order to meet any form of a profit at the end of the day or the year. So I think we're going to see a lot of pivots in terms of, like the QR code coming in and ordering from that, or people ordering and just kind of grab and go, picking it up, which really defeats the whole reason why any of us are in the restaurant business to begin with, right? It's a hospitality industry. We wanted to see our customers and greet them and make a connection. And, we put a lot of thought into the decor and the music and what that experience is like when you walk into a place. And so this idea of the grab and go model and people getting delivery, I think is here to stay, and it's a little bit disheartening.
We actually had a question that popped up in the chat from Carrie. The increase of takeout has a sustainability impact. I suspect eco-friendly takeout containers are more expensive. Do you see trends in sustainable packaging to meet this takeout trend?
So it's interesting, we do eco-friendly and sustainable packaging, and the prices are not that crazy unless you're going with like something, over the top in that department. But what's happening now is you haven't been able to get anything for 6 months. So we've all started going to whatever it is we can get. And so the pricing fluctuates so much on that. And some of it is not eco-friendly, but it's just what we have, right? At Good Stuff Eatery, and this kills me. I had to have lunch there the other day with somebody. We have, because of COVID, we have a fork, knife, and spoon all packaged separately in plastic, and it's a plastic utensil. And we go through so many of those, and it's crazy. And we've gone through 3 or 4 vendors because they don't have them. They don't have the package available where the fork, knife, and spoon is all in one, so you can be eco-friendly. You have to do it all separately. So it's almost like it's reverse now, where the market is really dictating what you're doing in your restaurants. And that's the same with delivery containers and what we put our salad in. We used to use a sustainable paper bag that they just couldn't produce anymore. And so then we had to switch to another bag. Like you said, it was a little bit more expensive, but people needed a bag to take out their food. So it's just been very on and off. I would like to think that the sustainable trend of making things more in tune price-wise would happen. It just doesn't look like it now. It looks like, everybody's trying to make money, like Kathy said, to recoup 18 months of a crazy loss. And so, people aren't lowering prices on things. If anything, they're keeping them steady or even increasing them because they know that others have no choice.
Mm-hmm. So, Jeanine, let's switch a little bit to talk about what opening looks like. So you've opened a restaurant during normal times. Now you're opening one during a pandemic. What have been some of your biggest challenges with opening a new restaurant during all of this?
Yeah, well, as everyone here knows, opening a restaurant in the best of times is pretty difficult. So just imagine those challenges multiplied. And so it's been really rough. Some of the issues Michy was just alluding to, for example, the supply chain issues, just getting equipment, the time that it takes to get equipment in, the costs of all that you need to get a restaurant ready to go, all the equipment, chairs, tables, all those things, wood, the cost of wood, just so many things have increased in price. So it's become more costly to open a restaurant. And then, of course, with delays, if you're paying rent, the carrying costs before you actually are starting to bring money in. So definitely way more costly. Another significant challenge is staffing. It's just so hard to find good people. And as you're opening a second restaurant, you want to make sure that your first location is in good hands and ready to withstand the diversion in your attention. And so you want to have good teams in place in both places, and that's been a huge challenge for us. And folks are tired. We were fortunate in being able to keep most of our all the employees at Kane who wanted to stayed with us, and we want to build a company where people can grow and with folks who are committed to staying in this industry. And so we want to keep the folks that we have long term, and they're tired. They're really tired. And there was sort of a honeymoon period, I think, at the beginning of the pandemic, where folks were super sweet and understanding about less than perfect service. And I feel like we've passed that. Folks are just tired. Everybody's Uber drivers are angry. Delivery drivers are, just upset not picking on Uber. But I just think everybody is exhausted. And so, attracting new folks to build up a new team has been a significant.
Yeah, I'd say burnout is definitely the name of the game during COVID, that's for sure, on so many levels. Well, I think it's a good time to talk to you, Kathy, about the next big issue for the industry. That's Initiative 82. So we all know what happened with the move to eliminate the tipped minimum wage in 2018. Throw in a global pandemic, social justice movement, general upheaval in the industry, all around burnout. And this initiative looks very different going into the 2022 election here in DC. So talk us through what's different this time around and how the RAMW plans to unify operators and staff who are likely, with very differing positions on the issue.
Yes, so it's so interesting with what Jeanine was saying. I have so many thoughts with what she has shared, and also Micheline, but I'm going to practice discipline and not redirect all of us. But I will tell you that, the staffing crisis in and out of our industry, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. The reason we're dealing with these supply chain issues is because they don't have enough people to make what needs to, it's so complex. But the fatigue also, I think staffing and fatigue directly play into where we are right now with an initiative that is before us in Washington, D.C. It is currently just Washington, D.C., but given we are the nation's capital, the proponents of this initiative will use that as a model as they go talk to other cities and states around the country. So what is Initiative 82 and how is it different than a piece of policy? When there is an initiative, it is put on the ballot for voters to vote in. So it can be as complex as the way that restaurants utilize the tip credit and tipped minimum wage and minimum wage. It can be as simple as every district resident gets a free toaster. It's really the language that's always been a part of the challenge, is that there are just issues that should not be debated through public vote versus thoughtful consideration through policy, to make sure that what needs to be considered is considered with the voice of those who are impacted the most. A few years ago, we had something called Initiative 77 in DC, where the idea was to eliminate the tip credit, and all restaurant operators would move to this one wage model. Now, many many fast casual operations are already on this somewhat of a one wage model because they don't utilize tip credit as much. But most of our independently owned full service do utilize the tip credit because their employees, their workers who are typically tipped workers, they are making far more than what that minimum wage would be, which is the required $15 an hour in DC. Few years ago, we had workers and we had operators who are very united in, oh my gosh, we need to fight this initiative. Initiatives in DC, 85% of initiatives, actually 90% of initiatives are voted in at 85% or above. They're just voted in. No matter what the subject matter is, they are voted in. So back then, what we needed to do and what we did was we just built this very complex strategic campaign where we mobilized workers, operators, and also politically created the strategy to bring enough awareness to then go to the body of elected officials to overturn a vote that people voted in. 3 years ago, that was unpopular. You can imagine what that's today. Going to an elected official and asking them to overturn what the people voted in is just not a good look, no matter what the issue is. So 82, so we won. We preserved the tip credit. We asked them to overturn this vote. And it was a very different makeup in terms of city council members. So a lot has changed this time around. The proponents came back. They found an opportune time in their mind as operators, industry, community was resetting coming out of the pandemic to reintroduce this initiative to be voted in June, which it would eliminate the tip credit. And what that would mean for restaurant operators, no matter where you are on the issue, I mean, where I am on the issue is that I always want small business owners to have choice. As long as they are doing things legally, they are taking care of their people, and they are trying to be the purpose-driven leaders they are in the markets in which they provide a service or business. That is what we as an organization support. We support choice in that way. What is before us is this elimination of tip credit to go to this one wage model. And no matter where, as I said, people are on the issue, because many operators have moved to a one wage model and they now have a service charge, or they did that only during the pandemic and now they want to switch back to what worked pre-pandemic. What we are seeing is that the staffing crisis and the voice of the workers, coupled with fatigue, coupled with political realities of it's gonna pass. The question is, what is our role going to be as an industry and organization to think about how we're driving policy to minimize risk and losses versus allowing this to just be voted in and everybody has to do everything that is on the language, in the language that would go on the ballot. And, you know, I will say this, you know, to this group, it's exhausting that we're dealing with this issue again. We've dealt with this issue. We have fought this issue for 8 consecutive years in different shapes, form, and fashion, whether it was a public initiative, whether it was legislative, political, helping people understand how the restaurant industry works and how it is an industry of opportunity. But there is momentum, a movement, and a desire in and outside of our industry to go to something that creates maybe stability, some more uniform wage models, and it will work and will not work. And that's the challenge, is that we don't know. But my job in a very, very, very short period of time, as we're talking to hundreds of operators over the last several days, is what is the preferred path? Is it to just allow this to happen, knowing that we don't have the fight options that we had several years ago? Or is it to drive policy to make this work in a way that if elimination of tip credit were to happen, it happens in a way that at least we can control a bit more? And I'm so sorry if this is confusing. It's as I talk to people who are making the decisions, when they look so confused, I'm really worried. because they're the ones making the decisions. But I think everybody knows on this call and on the panel that you as restaurant operators want to have the ability to control how you are running your small business. And while there may not be while there may be bad players in every industry that are not doing things the right way, we are in a market where we have a lot of amazing operators doing things the right way, and they have for a very, very long time. So it's somewhat offensive, I think, for all of us who live, work, and raising children in this market, have families here, have been committed to the city or region, to have an outside organization come in and tell us how we should be running our businesses. And, so we're at a crossroads right now. We're trying to figure out what the path forward looks like. We have a few days, but I'll tell you, as I talk to hundreds of operators, those who several years ago wanted to get ahead of this issue and say, you know what, I am going to rethink my business model. Today, they have no capacity to rethink all of what is so complex about rethinking in a day where they are just trying to sustain what they built their model on. So I'm really concerned. I'm concerned because it is going to change things. I don't know that people are able to get outside of their restaurants right now because they're working so very hard each and every day. And the wonderful people that have been able to be a part of the conversations are people that, yes, have been able to make time to have the conversations, but there are scores of restaurant operators who have not been able to leave their restaurant. And those are the restaurants I worry about, because this is going to be a change that is not going to be something that they potentially can survive. How is that, Charissa?
I don't envy you or the position that you are in. But I am confident that you will continue to do a phenomenal job leading the industry through a very tumultuous process. So thank you for that. Micheline, Jeanine had mentioned a honeymoon, which is, I laughed when she said that, because that was my next question for you, that, some of us, and I think it's also a good question to bring up after a robust discussion around labor, but some of us think that the honeymoon of guests having compassion for the industry is over. I would be one of those, but how have
it is way over.
Way over.
That ship has sailed. Yeah.
Long time. So how have consumer behaviors changed overall, apart from just not having any compassion? And what do you see as sticking around as we come out of this? And do you think that people are finally ready to pay more for the food that would reflect rising costs of ingredients and labor and everything else that comes along with that?
Okay, a lot of questions, but
yeah,
I will start with the first one. The last one. I personally don't feel people are willing to pay higher costs. I know that among some restaurant people, I'm in the minority of that, and people are raising their prices, which I think it's a little different again when you're at a sit-down restaurant versus my fast casual. But you go to some restaurants and they have now the 22%. And a lot of restaurants have an additional fee that's like a fair wage fee, or, however they call it. I'm finding a hard time to do that. I think it's difficult to, when you walk out for lunch and it's $12, $13 already, to bump it to $15, $16, $17 for lunch, to me is hard. And I don't think people get that some of the extra costs are going to the employees. And I don't think they get that it's going to the supply chain. I think most people think that it's a profit, that we're just kind of exploiting everything and we're pocketing that money. So I'm nervous to do that because of that reason, because most people don't think, oh, the avocados, whatever, were $10 a case and now they're 30. I don't think anybody is thinking of that when they're coming in to order food. I'm obviously making up numbers, but so I think there's that. I think also there are customers that have stuck through us. We have like a great regular clientele. And the frustration that the customer is dealing with is also on us. So for instance, we went from 15 people on the line to 5 and 4. And so that, food that would maybe take you 7 minutes from when you order to when you grab, take it, and it's cooked fresh, obviously, is now taking 14 minutes or 12 minutes because there's just no staff, to Jeanine's point. And so customers get very irate and frustrated now. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, people were dealing with it because they were trying to figure out that we were all like gloves and masks and plastics and 6 feet and you can't come in and where's, it was just so chaotic that I think customers were willing to like live through it with us. But I think most people now are expecting back to normal and they're expecting what was going on in 2019 without realizing that we are far from 2019. And it's taking longer, and it's just taking longer because there's just not that many people to do it. The people that we have, a few of them are trained properly, some are not. And it's just because it's rotating. Like it's the staffing issue is a very real issue. And I think that frustrates customers. And so they've been back to getting a little bit nasty about that. Yeah, so I think that's very real. Was there another one in there, Charissa? I think I got it, right?
I think you got it all.
Okay.
Jeanine, as a Black-owned restaurant, you mentioned to me that Kane did some of its best business in June 2020. Do you see support of Black and minority-owned businesses as having consistent staying power? And have you seen an ongoing interest and curiosity in food about the Caribbean and from the Caribbean region?
I would say yes and no. I think that period was a bit exceptional, and folks were reacting to the social justice movement, and a lot of interest in how can I be a better ally, and that just really drove up interest in our business and the desire to support our business. We haven't seen that really sustain since then, and that's, I guess, to be expected. But we have seen sort of the rise in platforms. Even some of the delivery companies are making it easier to find out, whether a restaurant is Black owned or minority owned, and making them more visible. So I think there have been some positive sort of systemic changes, but I think just sort of in terms of the general public and their awareness, they want to support and patronize restaurants that give them the services and the value that they're looking for above all. And that's, ultimately what it comes down to. We have been really fortunate in that our, the H Street community, both the residents, the businesses there have been so supportive of us, and the connections with folks on this call. I am regularly texting and calling up Micheline, for example, for advice. We worked with, we were a part of Eric Bruner Yang's initiative, Power of 10 initiative early on, just really, the support of our neighbors, both businesses and guests, has really gotten us through. Micheline talked about, we really built up our takeout business. We didn't do takeout business really prior to the pandemic, but you're doing more volume, but it's not necessarily more profitable because the margins are so low there. So it's been, that has definitely been a challenge. But I, you know, to answer your question, I do feel like there is heightened sensitivity and some permanent changes in terms of visibility of Black-owned businesses and, you know, the contribution that Black-owned businesses, Black food has contributed to the food scene. And I think we're seeing more and more interest in people experiencing and exploring food from the African diaspora.
Well, I think I want to be mindful of time right now, as I know we got a little bit of a late start. And so before I sort of go into the last questions, there was one from the chat here. I don't know if it's from Lori Gardner or another Lori Gardner, but if we can bring the experience back to dining, do you think the customer can look past the increase in pricing and tipping? I don't know who wants to take that. Maybe Micheline.
So in my opinion, you know, you go around DC and the higher end restaurants seem to be super busy. It looks like there's a lot of people in those restaurants that have been able to have that full experience. You know, whether you show your vax card or not, but people can sit down inside, they see the decor, they have that, like, you know, heightened customer service experience. So I think there's a lot of restaurants in DC that are still doing that experience. I just really feel that at the end of the day, people are more mindful of their money right now, right? People are more worried about, did they get laid off? Did they go on unemployment? Are they going back into work? Did their job realize that maybe they don't need so many people, you know, post-pandemic? Like, I just think there's so many factors that I think, at least from me, you know, when you walk into our whole philosophy as a restaurant group is, you know, comfort food with a chefy twist. And we try and make it kind of chic and fun atmosphere when you walk into the spaces and you can sit in or take it out. I just still don't think people would pay $6 for a slice of pizza, you know, no matter how pomp and circumstance I make it. I think there's a cap on that. I think it's a little bit easier maybe for finer dining restaurants, maybe middle, you know, level restaurants are still going to struggle with that price structure. But at least for me, I think the answer is no on that. But I did want to just piggyback on what Jeanine said, that the silver lining of this entire pandemic is also, for me, the restaurant community, which I knew, I now really know. Like, I know the owners, we talk regularly, we've made amazing connections, we swap stories. Ruth, Diane, and Fiona from Pizza Paradiso, Cork, and the District Fish Fry, we organized a women-led organization during the pandemic, so we can all kind of exchange ideas and thoughts on what's been happening to us. That would have normally never happened without the pandemic. And it's been so helpful and amazing that we've all been able to support each other. So I think that Jeanine, 100% right. Silver lining all the way of what's happened is to form, you know, stronger bonds and collaborations and more connections and things like that.
Well, I think that's a great transition into one of my final questions, is that you are all working mothers, everyone on the panel. And we know that this pandemic has disproportionately affected women, especially mothers. How did you cope through the last 18 months? And, you know, what do you see as, you know, as we're all about turning lemons into lemonade during this recovery, what do you see as opportunities for women and working mothers in the industry? I don't know who wants to go first.
I can jump in. Well, I know for us, you know, when we were doing takeout, in some ways it's a little less demanding in terms of needing to have presence at the restaurant as much as when we're offering dine-in, and that was a blessing in some ways, that, you know, allowed me to supervise school work going on at home, so that that sort of worked out. But I do think, as an industry, and, for the women that are working for our restaurant, we're, and working parents more broadly, just kind of looking at, flexibility, benefits, and things that we can do to make the lives of working parents easier, has been an important lesson. I think more folks, and the way we schedule our staff, more folks, we're really looking at those things as well. Our staff are just, they want to spend time with their families. I think that the pandemic has, and our brush with mortality, if you will, is just bringing that message home around what's most important. And so, we want to run our business in a way that really honors that, and the family commitments and connections that folks have.
Mm-hmm. That's well said. I have 3 children, so I'm surprised that we're all alive at the moment. It was absolute insanity in my house. I don't even know how I'm still sane, but it was a lot of juggling, and the restaurant industry was one of those that you just had to keep it open. You had to keep going, and you couldn't really work from home, even though you did a little bit. You kind of had to show your face because you were asking your staff to put their lives on the line as well, right? So it was kind of a little bit of a weird situation in that term. And then the schoolwork thing was, I ended up putting my kids in school elsewhere. But anyways, I survived. My lessons learned, though, like Jeanine said, is we used to do 8,000 events a year because I felt that we needed to be constantly in people's faces so they knew that we were around. And on the block. And those were a lot of nights that I wasn't home, or that I'd come home, cook dinner, and then go run back to an event. And I was constantly exhausted as a mom doing that. And my lesson is I will most likely not be doing that in the future. I'm cutting down on what we're participating in, what we're doing. The time home with the kids, I realize that the kids really need that time. I have younger kids. And one of the things I always used to think in my head was it's, not necessarily the quantity of time, it's the quality of time you spend with your kids. And COVID just completely flipped that for me. I realized it's actually the amount of time you spend with your kids, for my kids, at least. And so, moving forward as a mom, I think you just have to make these sacrifices and these decisions of, where you're going to go and what you're going to be. And if your business suffers a little bit, Jeanine was saying that we do so many things and we're so busy. I think it's one of the outcomes of COVID. We're just not going to do as many things, at least for me. Kathy?
Yeah, no, I would say, what got me through was definitely women in my life and beautiful things around me that we have in DC that I never really had time to focus on, just walking and trails and being outside and appreciating not only having to be outside most of the time, but connecting with people in a way that, it was raw and sometimes emotionally a lot, but so needed. So the women and walking got me through. My son, I think that as we spent more time together, what's interesting is I found moments to unplug even for 30 minutes. I didn't, like all of us, I wasn't great about unplugging. It was hard to when so many people were in crisis, but I did find ways to unplug for short periods of time and be really fully present in what I was doing. So I learned that about myself, and I'm trying to do more of that. And I'm trying to give myself some grace and those around me, and teach my son to please do that for his mom and offer that grace to his mom, but also for himself. He who thought middle school would be weird virtually. I thought maybe he would prefer it, but it was, of course, really, really hard. But I'm just really fortunate that I have a community of amazing women in my life. I really am. And I find that I'm trying to be much more intentional in how I spend my time, which speaks to what Mish was saying a little bit. It's kind of saying no to the busy and trying to focusing on ways to feel full, because we're busy all the time, but are we full from being busy? Not always.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, I think I had some lightning round questions, but I think we're short on time. What I will say is that you did manage to answer one of them, which was, what good habit have you learned from COVID? And that would certainly be one. But if maybe you could all just sort of end on a quick note and give us 2 answers to what podcast or book have you been enjoying recently, and what TV show did you binge watch during COVID? So we can all go into some winter viewing with some great tips.
Good call. Wow. I feel like I've read 100 books and I'm trying to think of any titles right now. Oh, The Overstory, I thought was one, not for everybody, but I read that book and I loved it. It was about stories intertwined with nature, which I'm the furthest thing from a nature person, but the writing in this book was just beautiful. And very well done. And I would walk out after reading it and just, look at the tree, like what Kathy was saying. Oh God, this is actually really pretty. So that was, that was a good one for me. Somebody else go. I'm going to try and think of a show. I don't know.
I loved Ted Lasso. It brought me so much joy.
Yeah.
Just joyful. And I love the podcast series, The Good Life Project. Just a lot of fun lessons around how to be intentional, kind of choose your tribes that support you. And I think it's Jonathan Fields. I'm not sure, but those were kind of my two things.
Added.
Mm-hmm.
Jeanine?
I'm feeling like very uncultured because I'm not watching a lot of TV or reading a lot of books right now.
Good for your brain.
But I should say my sort of pandemic lessons have been just ruthless prioritization. Just how important is this, and how important is it that I do this now of all all the things that are important to me. Really to say no to things more, and think before I say yes to any commitment, think about what my intention is, my purpose is this activity line up with that? Otherwise, don't have time for it.
And that's a great note for us to end on. Catherine, I don't know if there were any other questions that came through that we didn't touch on.
No, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much, Jeanine, Micheline, Kathy, Charissa. Like, it's such an engaging conversation, so much covered between the, you sort of hope and optimism, a little bit of pessimism about the consumer, some urgent call to action related to the RFF, and some great personal stories to bring us all home. Just thank you all for doing this in support of Les Dames programming. For anybody in the audience, you can follow all these amazing women on Instagram. You can find them over at Les Dames DC on our Insta page, and then go off from there. I also put some resources in the chat, but we will send a thank you email around. But I just, on behalf of everybody at Les Dames, and Jill Collins, who's the Vice President of Programming, and Lori Gardner, who is our Vice President or Chair of Communications, and Stacey Adams, our President. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you guys for listening. This was great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.